Will you marry me?
Oh my God. I can't believe it. Yes.
Rich lady mocked the airport janitor until he returned. Her lost diamond ring from 30 years ago. "Careful not to scratch my bag," she said coldly. "It costs more than your salary." The janitor froze, his mop still dripping water onto the airport floor. His hands, worn and cracked from years of cleaning, gripped the handle a little tighter. The woman walked past him without looking back. Tall, elegant, wrapped in designer silk, her heels clicking against the marble like a metronome of pride. Her name was Victoria Lane. 60 years old. Wealthy, polished, and used to the world booing when she spoke. She was flying first class to Paris, and the airport staff knew her well. Not because of her charm, but because of the way she treated people she thought were beneath her. He was David Carter, a black janitor in his late 50s. His uniform was faded, his shoes squeaked a little when he walked, and his back ached from double shifts. But his eyes, kind, tired, and honest, carried a calm that money couldn't buy. As Victoria strutted away, the airport echoed with the sound of her perfume and her pride. David quietly knelt to clean the water she'd stepped through, his face unreadable. One of the younger cleaners muttered, "Man, how do you take that?" "She talks to you like dirt." David smiled faintly, dipping his mop again. "Son," he said gently, "you can't mop pride off marble. You just clean around it." The younger man laughed quietly, shaking his head. But David's eyes lingered in the distance, watching Victoria glide through security like royalty. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the tone of her voice, or maybe something about her face, but she felt familiar. An hour later, the airport buzzed with its usual chaos. Flights delayed, announcements blaring, people rushing, arguing, crying. Amid the noise, David found something shining beneath a seat near the VIP lounge. Small, delicate, and glowing under the light. It was a diamond ring. The kind you don't just drop. The kind that holds stories. He picked it up carefully, staring at the engraved letters inside. Forever. 1994. His breath caught. He rubbed the ring with his thumb, eyes narrowing. That year, that engraving, that design. He'd seen it before, decades ago. Suddenly, memories flashed. A younger woman, crying in a small-town diner, the same diamond ring on her trembling hand, and a man walking out the door. Never looking back, David's eyes softened. His voice dropped to a whisper. "It can't be." He looked toward the gate where Victoria Lane sat, scrolling through her phone, her diamond earrings catching the light. She didn't notice the janitor watching her, or the past catching up to her, and for the first time in 30 years, the man who once loved her was standing just a few steps away, holding the ring she'd lost the night he walked away. David turned the ring over in his palm again, tracing the worn engraving with a trembling thumb. The words, "Forever," 1994, shimmered faintly under the airport lights. He could feel the years between then and now like the space between two heartbeats. Across the terminal, Victoria Lane sat by the window of Gate 14, her diamond earrings catching the sunlight, her manicured fingers typing something shallow into her phone. The world saw a woman of class, confidence, and control. But David saw something else. He saw her then. 30 years ago, before the designer clothes and cold heart, she had been Victoria Reynolds, a small-town waitress with big dreams and a wild laugh. And he was a line cook with nothing but ambition and love for her. "We were supposed to start a life together," he murmured under his breath, staring at the ring. "And then life started without me." A soft announcement broke his thoughts. Flight 802 to Paris boarding soon. He looked up just in time to see her stand, her luggage trailing behind her like a shadow of her past. His chest tightened. He walked toward her slowly, every step heavy with memory. His reflection in the polished floor looked older, sadder, but determined. He had to return it. Not just the ring, the truth. When he reached her row, she turned slightly, irritated that a janitor was even approaching her. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said softly. "You dropped something." She didn't even glance up. "I don't drop things." "You did," he replied, his tone calm but sure. Annoyed, she finally looked up and froze. There was something hauntingly familiar in those eyes. He held out his hand. The ring sparkled between his rough fingers. "I believe this belongs to you." Her breath caught. The world seemed to blur around them. She reached for it with shaking hands, eyes wide. Where did you find that?" David didn't answer right away. He just watched her, the same way he used to, back when her smile was warm and her dreams were simple. Finally, he said, voice low and full of ache, "In the same place I lost you." The words hit her like wind against glass, sharp, invisible, unstoppable. Her lips parted, and a whisper escaped, one only he could hear. "David." He nodded once. "Hello, Victoria." And just like that, 30 years of distance collapsed into the space between a janitor's hand and a diamond ring. The sound of her voice, "David?" carried him straight back to a night burned into his memory like a scar. It was 1994. The air outside the small-town diner had smelled of rain and fried onions. Victoria Reynolds had been 29 then, laughing behind the counter, her eyes bright with hope, a diamond ring glistening on her hand. It was simple but perfect, bought with the money David had saved from months of double shifts at the grill. They were going to get married in June. They had nothing, no fancy clothes, no cars, just love that made the world feel big. But love, he'd learned, could crack faster than glass. That night, she'd walked into the diner in tears. He still remembered the way her voice shook when she said his name. "David, you promised me a future, and I can't live waiting for it anymore." He'd been confused, angry even. "I'm doing this for us, Vic. I'm working to give you a better life." "A better life?" she said, shaking her head. "I don't want a life I have to wait for. I got an offer to move to New York. Modeling, real money, real opportunities. You can come with me or stay here. But I'm not wasting my years on some day." He remembered how his stomach dropped. "So it's money now? That's all this means to you?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled the ring from her finger, that ring, and slammed it on the counter. "I'll come back when I've made something of myself." And she left, just like that, her heels echoing out the door, thunder rolling behind her. He ran after her, but by the time he stepped into the rain, she was gone. The diamond ring had rolled off the counter and disappeared under the booth, lost in the noise of heartbreak. He never found it. Until today, back in the present, the airport hum filled the silence between them. Victoria held the ring close, her hand trembling. "I thought I'd lost this forever," she whispered. David's voice was soft, almost kind. "You did, but some things wait to be found when you're ready to see what they're really worth." She looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Decades of pride and distance melted into something fragile. Guilt, maybe. Or gratitude. "You kept it all these years?" "No," he said. "It found me again, like we both had something left to finish." The intercom announced her final boarding call. She looked at the ring, then at him, torn between the life she built and the one she left behind. For the first time in 30 years, Victoria Lane, the woman who had everything, couldn't decide which world she belonged to. The loudspeaker echoed through the terminal again. "Final boarding call for Flight 802 to Paris." Victoria froze, clutching the ring in her hand. The same hand that had once thrown it away now shook like it no longer knew how to hold on. Her driver's voice buzzed faintly through her earpiece, asking if she'd boarded yet. She didn't answer. She turned toward David. His face was calm, steady, patient, the same way it had been all those years ago when life was simpler and love was free. "Aren't you going to miss your flight?" he asked softly. She looked past him at the long glass windows where planes crawled across the runway like glowing insects. The Paris flight was taxiing away, taillights fading into the sky. "I already have," she said quietly. David tilted his head. "You always did have a way with words." She gave a weak laugh, one that sounded more like a sigh. "I used to think the right words could fix anything." Sometimes, he said, it's not words that fix things. It's listening. There was a pause. She looked at him. Really looked, for the first time in decades. The fine lines on his face, the calluses on his hands, the streaks of gray in his beard. Life had marked him but not broken him. He looked grounded, real. They sat down at the small airport cafe nearby. The crowd moved around them, people rushing, hugging, crying. But for a moment, it felt like the world had given them a private corner in time. Victoria stirred her coffee absent-mindedly. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I stayed?" David smiled faintly. "Every now and then. But then I remind myself that if you had, you wouldn't be the woman you are now." She looked up sharply. "You mean cold? Alone?" He shook his head. "I mean strong. But somewhere along the way, you mistook strength for distance." Her eyes welled up. "I thought I needed to prove something, to be more than a girl from a small town. I wanted to be seen. And now you're seen by millions," David said softly. "But not by yourself." The words hit her like truth always does, quiet but piercing. "I had everything," she whispered. "Houses, cars, fame, but I never had peace. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw the girl who left the only person who ever loved her for who she really was." David's eyes softened. "Maybe that's why life brought us back here. Not to fix the past, but to let you stop running from it." She smiled sadly, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You never married?" He shook his head. "I tried. But love like ours doesn't happen twice. I figured God gave me one good story, even if it didn't end the way I wanted." Victoria covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. She whispered, "I'm sorry, David, for how I left, for how I became." He reached across the table and touched her hand gently. Not romantic, but forgiving. "You were young, and I loved you enough to let you chase your dreams. I just wish you'd known you were already enough." For a long time, they just sat there, two people who once shared a life, now sharing silence that felt like home. They sat there in the quiet hum of the airport cafe, the world moving around them. The sound of luggage wheels, intercom announcements, and the distant hum of jet engines. Yet, inside that small booth, time stood still. Victoria wiped her eyes and looked at him carefully. "You look peaceful, David, like life's been kind to you." He chuckled, the sound low and rough like gravel. "Kind? Nah, life's just been honest. It gave me what I needed, not what I wanted." She frowned softly. "What do you mean?" He leaned back in the booth, his hands clasped on the table. "After you left, I tried to follow. I went to New York once. Saw your face on a magazine cover. You were smiling, shining. I thought, maybe she found what she was looking for. So I stopped chasing what didn't want to be found." Victoria's heart sank. "David." He waved it off gently. "Don't feel sorry for me. I went back home. Took care of my mama till she passed. Took a janitor job after the factory closed down. Ain't glamorous, but it's honest work," he smiled faintly. "You'd be surprised what you learn when people stop seeing you. I've met folks at their lowest, scared, angry, broken, and I realized something. People aren't cruel because they're evil. They're cruel because they're empty." Victoria's eyes shimmered. "And what about you? Are you empty, David?" He paused, then shook his head slowly. "No, not anymore. The moment I found that ring, I realized I never lost the best part of my life. It was never the money or the wedding that didn't happen. It was the love that taught me how to forgive. Even when nobody said sorry." Her lip quivered. "You shouldn't forgive me." "Oh, but I already did," he said gently. "Years ago, because carrying hate don't hurt the person who left. It only burns the one who stayed." She took a shaky breath, staring down at the ring. "I spent my whole life chasing what that ring represented. Love, security, importance. But when I finally had it all, I realized it didn't fill me." David nodded, voice soft. "That's because love ain't in gold, Victoria. It's in the hands that hold you when you're nothing, not the ones that clap when you're shining." Her tears fell again, this time quietly. I wish I could go back. You can't, he said. But you can still go forward different. For a moment, the woman who had mocked a janitor was gone, and in her place sat the girl who had once loved a cook who dreamed too small for her world. The cafe lights dimmed slightly as the sun set through the airport glass. David stood slowly, picking up his mop handle, leaning against the wall. You still keep it polished, she said softly, smiling through tears. He chuckled. Yeah, some tools don't just clean floors, they remind you where you came from. As he turned to leave, she grabbed his hand gently. David, thank you for finding me again. He looked down at her hand, the ring sparkling between them. Maybe you were never lost, just waiting to remember. Paragraph 6. The decision Victoria sat in that empty cafe long after David left, her untouched coffee now cold, the ring glimmering faintly under the yellow lights. She turned it between her fingers, feeling the weight of 30 years. 30 years of success, applause, and loneliness. Outside the window, she could see him again. The black janitor pushing his cart, moving quietly down the polished floor. Every stroke of his mop seemed to erase a piece of her pride. She remembered the words he'd said just moments ago. You can't go back, but you can still go forward different. For the first time, she understood what that meant. She stood, adjusting her coat, and walked toward him. The terminal was quieter now. Most passengers were already gone. He didn't notice her at first, too focused on his work. When she spoke, her voice trembled. Not from nerves, but from humility. David, she said softly. He turned, surprised. Thought your flight left hours ago, she smiled faintly. It did, but maybe I wasn't supposed to be on it. David leaned on his mop handle, watching her carefully. You got somewhere else to be? Yeah, she said quietly. Here, he raised an eyebrow. Here, at an airport? She nodded, tears glinting in her eyes. I spent my whole life flying away from people who made me feel small. But maybe the problem wasn't them. Maybe it was me. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she reached into her purse and took out a white envelope. Her hands shook as she held it out to him. What's this? He asked. A thank you, she whispered. For what you did back then. For taking care of me when you didn't have to. For saving a part of me I didn't even know I'd lost. He hesitated, but she pressed it into his palm. Inside the envelope was a check, enough money to buy the diner they'd once dreamed of opening together. But before he could speak, she added quickly, Don't say no. You always gave and I always took. Let me give something back. David smiled, shaking his head slowly. You really think this makes us even? No, she said softly. It just makes me human again. He looked down at the check, then folded it carefully and slipped it into his pocket. You know, I never wanted anything from you but peace. Then I hope this gives you both, she said. The intercom buzzed again, announcing another flight. A different one this time. Victoria glanced up at the screens. Not Paris, not business. Just home. She looked back at David. Maybe it's time I go somewhere real. He nodded. You already are. As she turned to leave, she placed the diamond ring gently on his cleaning cart, next to his gloves and a half-used spray bottle. Keep it, she whispered. It was always more yours than mine. Then she walked away, not with the proud click of her heels, but with the soft, steady steps of someone who finally remembered how to walk with grace. David picked up the ring, the light reflecting in his eyes. For the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him. Not sadness, but release. He looked down the long terminal where she disappeared into the crowd and whispered, Goodbye, Vic, and thank you. Paragraph 7. The dream rebuilt months past. The airport floors still gleamed under the bright lights, and the travelers still rushed past like waves that never stopped. But one thing had changed. David Carter wasn't just a janitor anymore. A soft jazz tune hummed through the speakers of a small, cozy cafe tucked inside the very same airport. Above the door hung a simple wooden sign that read, The Forever Cafe, established 2025. Inside, the air smelled of warm biscuits, roasted coffee, and something deeper. Belonging. At the counter stood David, apron tied, his hands no longer gripping a mop but a coffee pot. The man who once cleaned up after strangers now served them with pride. The money Victoria gave him hadn't bought luxury. It built legacy. He'd used it to open this cafe right where they met again, and every detail held meaning. The teal booth by the window, the checkered floor, the ring-shaped light fixtures, all tiny echoes of the diner they once dreamed of owning together. Every morning, airport workers stopped by before their shifts, pilots, security guards, flight attendants, even janitors. They all came for the same thing, a bit of kindness that tasted like home, a small framed photo hung near the register, a young Victoria Reynolds in her waitress uniform, smiling beside a much younger David in his cook's hat. Underneath it, in her neat handwriting, was a small note. To the man who never stopped believing in goodness. Thank you for finding me again. Customers often asked who she was. David would just smile, and as she left, she turned back one last time, her shoulders lighter. And for David, that was enough. He wasn't trying to change the world, just warm it, one person at a time. That night, as the terminal lights dimmed, David locked up the cafe and sat by the window. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the diamond ring, the one Victoria had left behind. It still gleamed faintly, its shine softened by time. He whispered, "We did it, Vic. We built our dream." The reflection of the cafe lights danced in the ring, flickering like a heartbeat. Somewhere, maybe halfway across the world, he liked to imagine Victoria smiling, finally at peace. He placed the ring inside a glass case by the counter, right beside the photo of them both. The plaque beneath read, "Love never gets lost, it just finds new ways to shine." Paragraph 8, the letter and the light one. Quiet morning. Long before the first passengers arrived, David unlocked the cafe as he always did. The sun had barely risen, and the terminal still slept in silence. He turned on the lights, poured himself a cup of coffee, and smiled at the familiar hum of his second home. Then he noticed something on the floor just inside the door. A small white envelope. It had no return address, just his name written in careful, elegant handwriting. "For David," he frowned, turning it over. The paper smelled faintly of lavender, the same perfume Victoria used to wear. His heart skipped. He sat down in his favorite booth by the window where the morning light poured in like gold and opened the envelope slowly. Inside was a folded letter and a small Polaroid photograph. The letter read, "Dear David, by the time you read this, I'll be somewhere quiet, away from noise, away from the world that once owned me. I didn't go to Paris that day. I went home. I sold the house, the jewelry, the things I once thought defined me. Funny, isn't it? The things I used to worship turned out to be the very things keeping me empty. I wanted you to know that your kindness didn't just return a ring. It returned me. For years I've carried guilt heavier than gold, and you took it off my shoulders with 3 simple words. I forgive you. I can't change the past, David, but I can honor it. I've started a foundation in your mother's name, the Carter Hope Fund. It'll help janitors, cleaners, and blue-collar workers' families get scholarships and medical care. The world should know the beauty in people like you. Thank you for teaching me that dignity doesn't wear designer clothes. It wears humility. You were my home once, and now, even from far away, I'll keep helping you build the light we both lost long ago. Forever." Victoria, David stared at the letter, his throat tightening. The photograph slipped from his hand and fluttered to the table. It was a picture of Victoria, standing outside a small coastal house, smiling like she finally knew peace. For a long time, he just sat there, letting the tears fall freely. Not from sadness, but from gratitude. For second chances, for closure, for love that had found a softer way to stay. He folded the letter carefully and placed it inside the glass case beside the ring. The morning sun hit the counter, lighting both objects in a glow so warm it almost looked alive. He whispered softly, "You finally found your way home, Vic." As the first passengers walked by, a little girl stopped at the cafe window. staring at the shining ring and the note beside it. "Mister, what's that?" she asked curiously. David smiled. "That," he said, "is proof that love never really leaves. Sometimes it just takes the long way back." The girl giggled, waved, and ran off. David turned the cafe sign to open.